Celtics Beat is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
What's up, everyone? Welcome in to edition of Celtics Beat, where the still second place in the Eastern Conference Boston Celtics are. It's been a ride, hasn't it? Been a little bit of a roller coaster. I thought maybe on last week's show we got some of this out of our system, but here we go again on what many would tell you if they have been casually paying attention has just been a woeful, awful West Coast trip. When in reality, Boston is 2-1. Wins at Golden State, the Clippers, barely in overtime, got curb stomped by the Lakers, and now an opportunity to finish things off strong in Dallas. And heaven forbid, a 3-1 West Coast swing. Adam Kaufman, Evan Valenti, Brian Barrett is here from The Ringer. Barrett, how's it going?
I'm doing well, fellas. I'm doing well. I'm doing better than the Celtics after that game against the Lakers, but everything good on my end. How you guys doing?
Could be better because, again, this team has just, say what you want about where they are in the standings or how they're doing or, is the sky falling? They're 5-5 over the last 10. Oh, my God. But listen, you can't ignore that the last two performances against the respective LA teams have just been absolute dog crap games, both of them. In fact, the Clippers game, which they won, to me, is the worst of the two. It was, arguably, I don't know if it was the worst game of the season for the Celtics. I guess I have to take a little bit of the gruff off because they did manage a win. But holy crap, what an ugly, disgusting game. And I don't even say that as someone who was invested in Boston to cover the spread. I don't even care about that. It was just a miserable game to watch. Yeah, you were down a few of your better players. No Porzingis, no Horford, no Holiday, but you were going up against the JV Clippers, the G League Clippers. There was no Kawhi, no Harden, no Powell, no Batum, no Dunn, no, who else am I missing? I mean, they sat everybody just so they could go out and get an emphatic win the next game against Washington. And it was an awful, lackluster, lackadaisical, just sort of look from the start, checked out kind of appearance out of the Celtics. Total lack of aggressiveness out of Jason Tatum until he kind of finally had to turn it on. And then you think, okay, they get the turd out of their system. And now you got LeBron and AD. Everyone's back. Holiday, Porzingis, Horford, clean sheet on the injury report. Everyone's going to play. And you go out and you get rolled. Again, poor performance out of Tatum, really from the jump. Holiday, White, both awful. Porzingis played well. Brown had his moments. Generally, though, again, just a bad game. Whereas LeBron, Davis, they weren't superstars on the other side, but they did more than enough. Even, Reeves, like role players, fine. The Celtics, they just looked disinterested. And that sort of goes back, Ev, to the conversation that we spent a lot of time on last week. Again, bigger picture stuff. I don't want to break down the Clippers game. I don't want to break down the Lakers game. I don't want to singularly look ahead to the shorthanded Mavericks game. This is about where the Celtics are right now with the All-Star game not too far away. And, I don't, well, we can't. We're not connected to the team in any way, shape, or form. I don't know how to correct effort. I don't want to have the whole flip switching conversation because I just think it's too early for that. It's way too premature. But what we're seeing right now, Barrett, is a little concerning about, I brought this up last week, there's just something that seems off, which is so weird because it's the same group in every important way from last year that rolled the season and won the title. It's the same group, and yet something this year, other than your typical, it's hard to win back-to-back. It's hard to repeat. The record doesn't suck. They'll be fine. Blah, 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 blah. Something looks off in the DNA right now.
Yeah, well, I've been trying to say for basically as recently as a week ago that they're fine. They'll be okay, that this is the dog days of the season, and they'll turn things around, and they'll be fine because this is what we've seen. And most NBA champions are like this. Most NBA champions are not like what the Warriors did after their first title, their FU season, right? Most champions take a little bit of a step back, even if you look at what the Nuggets did last year. Yeah, they were still good, but a little bit of a step back from the prior season. But the thing that sticks out to me, you mentioned some of it, is the lack of effort. You look at their numbers defensively and you look up and you say, oh, those are actually really good numbers in terms of the defensive rating. But you look at some of the shots they gave up, especially in that game against the Lakers, where they couldn't contain Austin Reeves off the dribble. Their numbers, their last 22 games, they give up the most makes on wide open threes in the entire NBA. And then you look at the previous 23 games, they were sixth in that category. So that's something that I can't really grasp. And my theory on that is, first of all, Derek White and Drew Holiday are not playing the same level of defense on the perimeter that they were a season ago. I would say the same thing about Jaylen Brown. And the other component to this, and this is just my working theory, is remember a couple of weeks ago, and I can't remember exactly what game this was before, Missoula said they want to try to force more turnovers. And it feels like at times they're doubling in obvious situations where the passer could see the double coming. And then against Toronto, Joe Mazzulla said after the game, they went to the zone because they couldn't contain the cutting of the Toronto Raptors, who at the time were ranked 23rd. And I'm thinking to myself, hold on. This is the same Celtics team that just took one of the best offenses in the NBA last year in Dallas. Arguably at that time, everybody was saying the best offensive player in the league besides Jokic was Luka Doncic. They took away their best play because Jason Tatum was playing center. We're only months removed from that, and now we're talking about making adjustments to the Toronto Raptors. So there's something there in terms of the defensive effort, despite the numbers all looking good. When they need critical stops, we've seen they have not been able to get them. There's these fourth quarter just complete inexplicable mistakes. Jaylen Brown in the game against the Clippers. How do you throw that pass away, right? It feels like they baited them.
Hold the ball and get fouled.
Yeah, they baited a Drew Holiday in the Atlanta game, right? Where, hey, take the layup or take a foul. Instead, he turns the basketball over. And then, of course, he commits the foul when the Celtics are up 2. And him and Mazzulla both said after the game that he didn't lose track of the score. I can't believe that. I'm not saying these guys are liars, but how can that possibly be the explanation? They easily could have lost the New Orleans game. They got a 5-second violation. And then CJ McCollum gets a free trip basically to shoot a floater at the end of the game. Nobody stopped the ball. So that's the first part of it. There is some sort of a lack of effort where I'm like, okay, maybe they can pick that up, but I do get a little bit worried about what we've seen from them in terms of specifically White and Holiday defensively. But here's the other thing that concerns me, where I'm thinking, hey, they can just turn it on when they get to the postseason. The shooting, the last 22 games, in terms of their three-point shooting, it's 23rd in the NBA. They're shooting about 35% from three-point territory. It's been hovering between 20 and 23 over the past couple of games here. It's 35.2%. So can they just find it again and start shooting the ball well? Because they're struggling across the board. Derek White is shooting 30% from deep this month. Derek White, and this is my biggest concern with the team. Jason Tatum, I would argue, like, he's slumping a little bit right now. I think he's better than he was last year. Peyton Pritchard is obviously better than he was last year. Porzingis is turning it on finally as he comes back from the injury. Not finally, but now he's back from the injury. The rest of the guys are worse, okay? Derek White, I thought through the first 20 games of the season, Celtics going to have a third all-star. He's completely fallen off a cliff, right? And I feel like there's something going on there to the point where I would give him a week off. I don't know why you have to wait to the All-Star break. Drew Holiday, not the same player. And you can say, Drew's the one where I'm like, maybe he's saving some of the defensive stuff for the postseason, but he was 8th in the NBA in three-point shooting last year, north of 42%. This year, he's at 35%. So he's a below-average three-point shooter. And then Jaylen Brown, his two-point numbers are significantly down. His three-point numbers are down. He's in the 150s in terms of where he ranks in terms of three-point shooters. So when those three guys haven't been the same players as they were last year, that's what concerns me about the team. I think they can pick it up defensively. I really do. But when is Derek White, Drew Holiday, and Jaylen Brown going to look like, in the case of White, look like the player he looked earlier this season? But in the case of Jaylen Brown and Drew Holiday, are they going to look like the same guys they looked like in the postseason last year? Because I would argue that your three best players in the playoffs last year were Tatum, Brown, and Drew Holiday. And I know Derek White had the great start against Miami, but Drew made so many critical defensive plays against Indiana. Are we going to get back to that version of those three players?
Yeah.
We had Greeny on with us last week, right?
Yeah, we did.
Time's a flat circle for me. I mean, it feels like a couple weeks ago, and it was like November, So we had him on last week, and I like to. I don't know if you guys do this. If I want to know like what the pulse of Celtics, Twitter is, Celtics fans or whatever. Like, I'm not going to Reddit. I'm not going I just go to Greeny's page and look at all the people he's quote tweeting, and that will tell me, how people out there are feeling in the Celtics Twitterverse. And I want to isolate one tweet that he put out earlier today as we sit here and record, because I think it's very relevant. And listeners of this show, you've never heard these words out of my mouth before. So about to make some history. So Greeny quoted someone had, again, come back to the whole style of play conversation. We do this all the time. 3-point percentage, blah, 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 blah. Percentage of shots from three by month. October, when the team went 4-1, 55%. November, when the team went 12-2, almost 57%. December, dropped back 8-6, down by 3% to about 54%. January, 7-5 so far, down below just a smidge, 50%. A little less than half their shots are from three. The last 3 months, as the record has gotten worse, the Celtics have taken fewer three-pointers. And sort of acknowledging what Barrett was just talking about, Ev, with basically, is water going to find its level? We say that when they're super hot, will water find its level? When they're in a rut, will water find its level? Maybe the Celtics need to be taking more three-pointers.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about this is when you win a title and there's all the tapes out there of you just canning a bunch of threes, you bring it into the next season. I think teams basically are guarding the Celtics a little different this year. And, maybe the point is to run them off the line and make them shoot twos, which I think is interesting because Barrett and I talked about this last night, just texting back and forth. I found it interesting that Reggie kept hammering that point. And if you look at last season, they start out the year in October, 10.3. They're all going to be pluses, just so everybody knows. Okay, I don't have to say plus or minus. They kill it. They've been killing teams ever since last year. Okay, so they're plus 10.3 in October, plus 9.6 in November, plus 11.2 in December, and plus 7.8 in January. Similar to this year, they were better in October this year, plus 11.6. They were better in November this year, plus 10.1. And they were the same in December at 11.2. Okay. The record's different, but the margin of victory is either better or the same. Now, this month, still 4 games left to go. Their margin of victory is only 3.3, which is not Celtic-like over the past, year plus, right? Let's call it like 16 months-ish, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, it's just not the same. It doesn't mean I don't think the Celtics are capable of getting back to that point. I think they're just going through an interesting time where what Barrett said is true. My biggest issue right now is Drew Holiday is not the same guy that he was last year. Now, maybe that is he's played too much basketball this year, going to the NBA Finals and getting a huge opportunity with Team USA to be a big part of that team. Maybe the All-Star break gives these guys some time off. Jaylen acknowledged he's playing through some stuff right now, and that's maybe part of the reason why he isn't playing so well. You saw Tatum last night. He was holding his left wrist early in the game. Maybe he's got a couple of things going on. These guys need a little bit of rest to, I think, get back to where they need to be. Just because, it's not like these guys are green. It's not like the first time these guys are doing this thing. The Celtics have been going to the Eastern Conference Finals basically every year since Jason Tatum's been in the league. So, I'm not worried about, oh man, time off might take this team out of rhythm. No, this team is going to be fine. I do think they need some rest, but it's also important to keep in mind like what's actually happening in front of us. And what's happening in front of us is the Celtics are having a good year. It's not like it's a bad year. They're on pace to win 57, 58 games. The problem that you have is there's 2 other teams that are having just as good of years that you had last year when you had historic years. Like what Oklahoma City's doing this year is very similar to what Boston did last year. It's a historic singular season. Okay. Now, to do that twice in a row would be pretty unbelievable. Boston taking a step back this year. I think we maybe should have saw this coming a little bit more. It's just more difficult in real time to deal with it. But for one, and I feel like a lot of people are doing this, Barrett, maybe you can hop on board here in terms of backing me up on this. I'm not pressing the panic button yet. I think people are going nuts. It's just been a tremendous run from this team since Joe Mazzulla, Ime. I mean, it's been on a ridiculous run for several years now. There are going to be soft spots. And yet here we are, and they haven't lost 3 games in a row since, 2023? I mean, what are we really, like 2022? Like, this is – it's a ridiculous luxury this team has, and they're under the microscope of, like, the sharpest of microscopes. But I'm just not – yeah, it's a bad stretch. No question about it. Wake me up in March if they're playing this way. If they're still playing this way, then I think we can panic a little bit.
Yeah, well, a couple of things to that is, first of all, you mentioned sort of, and you guys were, Kaufman was bringing up the 3-point volume. And what sticks out to me about that is if you look at their last 5 losses. So the Wizards right now have the worst offensive rating in the league at 104.5. The Celtics last 5 losses. Lakers 102.1 offensive rating. Hawks 104.5. Raptors 103.2. Kings 98. Thunder 94.8. And a lot of that had to do with scoring 12 points in the fourth quarter of that game. It's just a miserable performance. But teams, to your point, are taking away their 3-point shooting, where what they're doing, certain guys like Hauser, who's shot the ball well lately, they're going to run him off the line. But the other big thing that sticks out to me, and it really started with the Hawks game where Dyson Daniels, the game that he had the 6 steals, teams are switching everything against the Celtics, where they're saying, okay, we're not helping, right? Because if Jason Tatum is going to score in isolation, and Jason Tatum is the most efficient high-volume isolation player in the league, we're going to live with that. But we're not going to live with, hey, if Jason Tatum gets downhill, we're not going to allow him to pass it to the corner to get a wide open 3, or pass it to the corner and the next pass is an open 3 for Derek White on the wing. Teams are guarding them differently. And the other thing that they're doing is, we saw this especially with the Clippers. They are getting up on Derek White. They are getting up on Jaylen Brown. Because if you look at the Celtics team, and it's something that surprised me last year that we didn't see more of, we're seeing it this year, and we especially saw it with Oklahoma City. I know the Celtics blew out the Rockets. I'm interested to see if the Rockets do this on Monday night because of their defensive personnel. How many good ball handlers do the Celtics have? Jason Tatum and Peyton Pritchard. That's pretty much it. I mean, Jaylen Brown, he still turns the ball over at an alarming rate for a player of his capability, in terms of just like, he's loose with the ball at times. Derek White's not traditionally a guy that beats you off the dribble. Drew Holiday is not like a fast twitch player that can beat you off the dribble from an offensive perspective. So teams are pressuring the Celtics, and it's taking away some of their ability to shoot threes. Now, the Lakers did differently, where, as Valenti pointed out, they're just like, hey, if Porzingis is going to cook our guys, and they're just going to keep playing through that, and they're just obsessed with throwing the ball to Porzingis, and he's taking these 2s, we're going to live with that. But we're not going to live with, hey, if he's the screener and he flips out to the wing, we don't want that happening. If that happens, we got to find a way to switch that, right? We got to make sure that we don't allow him to take that shot. So I think it is an adjustment. And the only thing I keep coming up with is the non-Tatum minutes are starting to become a thing again. And I feel like he's the one guy that really has the ability to run this offense right now. And it just feels like, from an offensive perspective, there's no real plan lately, right? Where it's like, you guys are struggling. Your beautiful game where you're getting all these open opportunities isn't there. The adjustment last night, it felt like, was, hey, let's just get the ball to Porzingis. But I go back to the Golden State game, where I know that Golden State stinks and they were dealing with all these injuries, but the Celtics' pet play last year, especially in the postseason, was Tatum sets a screen for Derek White. Tatum gets the smaller defender on him. Like, they should start going back to that more often. And it just feels like, for whatever reason, game to game, there's no consistency with what they do offensively. And I also look at the fact that, guys, Porzingis really wasn't part of the postseason run. And they played their best basketball. And Porzingis has been awesome since, like, the past 7-8 games or so. He's averaging like 20 and close to 10. But it almost feels like, to me, and I know this was like, it's crazy to say because they were the best lineup in the league last year. I almost feel like they're better off when, like, one guy is out of the lineup. And maybe this is just like a desperation thing where they're like, hey, we don't have Porzingis. Hey, we don't have Porzingis and Drew Holiday tonight. Like, that gives guys more opportunities. So what I would be doing, as much as I possibly can, is staggering the Tatum Jaylen minutes and making sure that I keep attached to Jaylen Porzingis. Because remember that whole 2-man game last year. So I think they got to figure something out from a lineup perspective. I'm not at the point where I think they should put Porzingis on the bench and start Al, but they got to figure something out in terms of the lineups, because the offense is more concerning to me than the defense right now.
We'll take a quick break, tell you about our good friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members, billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Think about that. 2 guys, more or less, and an opportunity to win 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long, Ev, on Prize Picks. Tell you what, getting your money couldn't be any easier, too. Once you hit in as little as 15 minutes, you can just watch the money roll into your account. Prize Picks even uses Venmo. Could it possibly be any simpler? Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after playing your first $5 lineup. So again, download the Prize Picks app. Promo code CLNS. You get $50 instantly after playing a first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Let's get back to the show. So we were just talking about, obviously, just, Tatum, what can Joe do? And again, Barrett, you mentioned like the Tatum minutes becoming a thing again, all of that. And people are quick to bring up just rotations in general and what that looks like. One thing that sort of caught my eye lately, I don't know if this is a me problem, but I feel like Tatum's usage specifically, and I'm not talking about usage stats and all of that. I'm talking about specifically the way he is used on the floor recently. And I know the whole point Tatum thing, and Ev has been a proponent of this for a long time. So I take no issue with that. I think Tatum is a phenomenal playmaker, and Barrett, you talked about his ability to handle the ball, all of that. But against the Clippers specifically, the fact that, he was generally playing that game from 3-point line to 3-point line. He was very rarely anywhere near the basket, even defensively. Just at times that you wanted him to take over, drive, or on the other end, go in for a rebound. Like, even if he was, let's say, somewhere inside the paint, the ball would carry him off the rim. He didn't even make an effort for it. He didn't even, reach for it. He certainly didn't jump for it until very late in the game when he stacked a couple of rebounds up. He ultimately finished with 7. You might look at the box score and be like, what are you talking about? Go back and watch that game. I don't know how much of this felt like kind of an isolated incident to you, but for me, it was jarring. It was alarming because that's just not the way I see Tatum engaged and at his best. That's not the way I want to see it. But what did you make of what I'm talking about here as you were watching it, be it against that game, in that game or in other spots of late?
Yeah, I didn't really notice that as much as you did in that Clippers game. Like, I feel like Tatum has actually taken a step forward this year. And I know his shooting hasn't been great lately, but that's the one guy that right now on this team, I'm not worried about at all. I feel like Tatum is going to be fine, even if some of the 3-point shooting hasn't been there. And I worry about other guys like Derek White. Mm-hmm. Like in that game against the Lakers, he wasn't even involved. Like, if he's not setting up to take a 3, what is he doing? It felt like he's not even involved in the offense whatsoever. So I feel like I understand the point where, like, hey, maybe there's one game where Tatum didn't go all out. My issue more so than anything else is like they're just getting cracked off the dribble too much, like on the perimeter. And I feel like that's the bigger issue for this Celtics team right now from a defensive perspective. And I will say with Jaylen, like, remember when it became a thing where he became their on-ball stopper last year, and he was unbelievable against Luka in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And he came out before the season. He said, I wanted to be all defense. I haven't seen that guy in a while, where he's covering these guys, but when he's like motivated to lock somebody down, I haven't really seen it. And the other thing that I haven't seen from the Celtics defensively is the playmaking of Drew. Remember when Drew was like, all of a sudden it'd just be like he's like a free safety, just sort of screwing things up for the opponent. And it started at the beginning of the year last year. Remember when they started him on Embiid? Like one of the first games of the season, like Drew's covering Embiid, like, and that was such a fun thing. Like, even when they played the zone last year, they're playing the zone this year when they're not playing well defensively. They played the zone last year when they wanted to like utilize it as a weapon and utilize Drew as a weapon, because him and Tatum are so good as off-ball defenders, sort of like roaming around and whatnot. And it just feels like this year, I don't know if Drew's like saving himself for what it is, but I felt like Jaylen and Drew specifically were like predatorial defensively last season. I just don't see that out of either one of those players right now. And like I said, like I understand these guys have played a lot of basketball, but what I need to see from this team, and the reason I am worried, to what Valenti was talking about earlier, I want to see him string it together for a while. Like I felt like, hey, Minnesota, that was a good win. Houston, that was a good win. Here we go. Oklahoma City, unbelievable first half. What the heck happened in the fourth quarter, right? Like, and then I think to myself, like, all right, you beat the Magic. Great game against the Magic, completely dominant. What happens on Sunday night? You lose, right, to Atlanta. Same thing, or whenever that game was, but you lose that game to Atlanta. And then you say, okay, well, Monday, and the Warriors were depleted. You beat them by 40. Great. Wednesday, not the best effort against the Clippers. And then you lay a complete egg against the Lakers. Like, I need to see them playing good basketball for an extended stretch for me to not be worried about this team. That's just the reality of where I'm at right now, because it's not just like they're not hitting shots. It's like they have issues right now that, quite frankly, I don't think can be ignored. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't think they could still be the best team in the league and win a championship. I truly believe that, but I need to see it.
The thing with me is, and what gets me frustrated about some of these games, the Clippers game and the Lakers game most recently, is, part of it is, and I'm not dismissing the fact that the effort, again, especially defensively, doesn't seem to be there from night to night. That's a little annoying, but again, a lot of defense is effort, and this team, might be a little bored right now. But also part of this is like other teams just like shooting the hell out of it and having the best nights they've had in a long time. Like you go back to that Clippers game, and I'm only mentioning this just for perspective. Like Derek Jones was 12 of 20 in that Clippers game. Kevin Porter Jr. was 12 of 21. Like those are not nights you normally get from those guys. Look at the Lakers. The Lakers hit 12 threes per game on average. They hit 11 in the first half. So it's like part of me is sitting there, I'm watching the Lakers game on Thursday night, and I'm sitting there like, yeah, some of this stuff's annoying. I'm not saying it's not annoying, but also I'm like, oh, the Lakers are going to hit everything tonight. Like, this is really annoying, because what's going to happen is Boston's going to do this lackluster thing, and they're going to get blown out because the other team, because they got in rhythm, just can't miss. Like Austin Reeves couldn't miss. You had, Hachimura wasn't missing too often. You had, a little bit of Gabe Vincent in there. It just was annoying to watch some of these guys go off. And it's like, all right, this is what happened. This is what's been happening all year. This team continually gets everybody's best shot every night. And as much as I might have talked about it in the beginning of the season, they weren't ready for this. This is hard. Washington is just an absolute garbage organization. They're going to come in and give you their best shot, right? Pelicans, same thing, even though they've been playing better lately now that Zion's been back. You're getting their best shot. Not only that, you're going to get the Lakers' best shot because LeBron's still trying to prove something at age 41. He's ridiculous. Trying to just let everybody know he's still one of the best players in the league. I just want to make the point of like everybody else seems to have like the best game in their life. What it reminds me, Barrett, is like if you go back to some of the games that Boston used to play against Golden State when Golden State was really humming and Boston wasn't quite there yet. I go back to that Isaiah Thomas game in Oracle, where I think it was 2017, where they went in there and ended the Warriors like whatever game winning streak. And that night they lost. And Steph spoke about this after the game, like they're going to be fine, et cetera, et cetera. I know it's a little panicky in Boston, but they're still going to be fine. Again, it's an effort thing for me. I think it's like a conserving your energy sort of thing. I would prefer if they didn't do this because it's just causing me to have more headaches than not. But at the same time, I still think this team is going to go to the NBA Finals, and they'll play Oklahoma City and roll the ball out and see what happens. I think Oklahoma City is basically the Celtics from last year and having a tremendous season. I don't think Cleveland will beat this team. I don't think the Knicks are beating Boston. And if anybody's looked at the Karl Anthony Towns, Jalen Brunson pick and roll combination, that has fallen off cliffs as the year has gone on. It's not nearly as effective play. I think they were generating 1.6 point per possession beginning of the season, the Karl Anthony Towns, Jalen Brunson pick and roll play. Now it's at like 1.1. So that's just falling way down. I think Boston, by the time we get to, the NBA Finals, will be there. And then, that's all you can really ask for from this team. It's not easy to just real quick. Boston didn't make any changes. Everybody talked about how the continuity was going to be great. The difference is teams around Boston certainly got better. And that's, I think, the biggest difference this year is teams around them have gotten way better than they were last year.
Well,
just real quick, just to piggyback on that real fast. Just remember, because there's what you're saying, Ev, and then there's what maybe like Twitter is saying. That's the total opposite end of the spectrum, where it's like, oh my God, the sky's falling. There's a happy medium in reality.
I think I am the happy medium. What are we talking about?
No, but like you're sort of like, you bring up like the Oracle example, which like, but that's one game. Like the Warriors maybe didn't bring it one game, and didn't the Celtics win that like in overtime or something? It wasn't a close game. So it's one game. Like this is not like Lakers Clippers. Like this is a 2-month stretch of the Celtics looking.
Coffin, they're 31-14. They're 31-14.
I'm not complaining about the overall record. I'm complaining about the night-to-night performance over the last 2 months. They look like they are sleepwalking through the season. We keep using the word bored. That's a problem. And it goes back to the whole, like, sure, like, I think we'd all like to believe, like, yeah, they'll be fine. They'll be, because they have the talent to be fine. But there's a mental component to that where, like, you're going to have to, you got to wake up by March to be bringing your best in April. If they want to have this malaise in February as well, so be it. But come March, like, you got to get it together.
Yeah, it's tough to be the flip the switch team because, all right, you can go back to Hakeem's Rockets the second year they won it, where I believe they were either the 5th or the 6th seed that particular season, and then he was pissed that David Robinson got the MVP. So he turned it on, and they turned it on once they got into the postseason. But I also look at, so the Shaq Kobe Lakers, they were able to turn it on just because, at that time they had 2 of the 3 best players in the league, right? When you had Kobe and you had Shaq, and then the other one in that category would be Tim Duncan. Even if you go to the Golden State Warriors when they had Durant and Curry, that second year with them, and guys missed time, but their record was significantly worse. And when they got into the postseason, remember, they weren't the number 1 seed. Houston was. And I don't want to say they needed a minor miracle, but they needed a lot of help to beat Houston. Like, it was tough for them to turn it on because Houston, remember, Chris Paul goes down with a hamstring injury at the end of Game 5. Houston has a 3-2 lead. Chris Paul doesn't play again in that series. In Game 7, Houston had a lead at halftime, and then James Harden and the Houston Rockets couldn't hit another 3. So it's difficult to turn it back on. It's not just like a switch that you can flip. And I agree with Valenti that some of it is shooting luck in terms of your opponent. But I would also say this, like, you go to that Lakers game last night, they generated 7 corner threes in the first half of the game. That's just unacceptable. You can't be giving up 7 corner threes. Like, those are one of the most efficient shots in the NBA, corner threes. I pointed out the numbers earlier. The last 22 games, they give up the most makes on wide open threes, right? And look, they give up the worst percentage too. Part of that is shooting luck. But I would also say part of it is, it almost feels like what has happened with this team is they're almost defending other teams like Grant Williams was defended in Game 7 against the Milwaukee Bucks, where they said, hey, Grant, take as many threes as you want to take. It feels like that's what the Celtics are doing right now, where so many times what I loved about this team, even going back to like Ime's year here, where they made it to the NBA Finals, and we saw it last year, they get into you. Like, there are times in those games last year during the regular season, especially in the playoffs, and maybe we get back to this in the playoffs, they're like, all right, here's a dribble handoff. Drew's going to screw it up. Jaylen Brown's going to screw it up. Like, they're going to break up these things that you think you can execute easily offensively, not happening because we're getting into you. We're taking pride in the defensive end of the floor. We're not letting you do any of it. It feels like now it's like, hey, we're going to play the zone because we can't handle Toronto's cutting. Or, hey, this guy's not a great three-point shooter, so we're going to allow him to shoot. Well, how about a couple of these games? You just get back to playing the defense that made you the NBA champions last year. Because I go back to that title run. Minnesota was the number 1 defense all year. They were the best defensive team in the league because of their versatility. We saw what happened when Luka and Kyrie played Minnesota. We saw a totally different result when the Celtics played them. So this capability should still be in there. Drew and Derek White were just all NBA defensive team last year. We praised Jaylen for his defense. We praised Tatum for his versatility. Porzingis is an unbelievable rim protector. Al was great in the postseason. Remember, what was it, Game 5? He's one-on-one against Garland, and Garland couldn't do anything against, at that time, how old was Al? 36 or whatever he was at that point. Like, I just want to see that level of defense rather than, hey, let's play the numbers. This guy's not a great three-point shooter. That guy's not a great three-point shooter. They're playing the numbers all the time. And they're getting burnt by the numbers because eventually what happens when guys are getting wide open looks in the NBA, you know what's eventually going to happen? They're going to start knocking them down. Okay, even if their percentage says they're not great, these are NBA caliber players. And I just hate the fact that it feels like lately they're trying to live that way, where it's just like, hey, the math's going to come back in our favor. Why don't you have to not rely on the math of the defensive end? You should have the personnel to be able to shut some of these teams down, and we're just not seeing it lately. And I know the defensive numbers across the board are great, but Austin Reeves beating you off the dribble. How many guards this season, and not Austin Reeves last night, think about all the losses they had last month where John Morant lights you up, Maxey lights you up, Zach LaVine lights you up, Donovan Mitchell lights you up. That is happening way too often this year, where one guard that can beat you off the dribble just scores 30. It was happening left and right against the Celtics team, and I just hope at some point we see them dial it up from that. And look, they could be saving it, but at some point I want to see it during the regular season.
Let's take one more break and tell you about our good friends at Game Time. There's nothing, and I mean nothing, better than going to a live game. Other than, I guess, maybe playing in it. But really, how many of us get the opportunity to do that? There are so many core memories that I have as a kid, even as an adult with my kids, that revolve going around to some sort of sporting event. Heck, my kids have been asking me lately, they'll see an ad on TV like, can we go see Dude Perfect? Can we go out to Worcester to watch the, Globetrotters? I mean, there are so many different things that are available to us. Going to a game, it couldn't be easier, thanks to our friends over at Game Time. Best part of Game Time is how easy it is to tell you how much money you are saving with Game Time picks. They have your tickets labeled with, quote, great deal and amazing deal. If you find your tickets labeled super deal, watch out, man. That means the tickets you're looking for are in the top 1% of prices based on value. And you usually see that right up front when you're scrolling through tickets as well. They make it pretty obvious. You don't want to miss a super deal. Big home games are coming up in February too that you're going to need to use Game Time for.
Yeah, look at the schedule, buddy. February 6th, you're going to have the NBA Finals rematch against the Dallas Mavericks. Kyrie will be at that one, hopefully, so another opportunity for Boston to stick it to Kyrie again. The French Connection with Victor Wembanyama coming to town in Boston, February 12th. Spurs in town. You get February 23rd. That's a Sunday. The Knicks at the TD Garden, the Battle of the Gardens. I would argue that the Boston Garden is superior. And the last game of the month in February 28th. Well, yeah, I got it. I think TD Garden's better. February 28th, last game is what I would call the Eastern Conference Finals preview between the Cavs and the Celtics against the Cavs, Kaufman. So it's the last time to weigh yourself against an opponent of that quality. Plus, with Game Time, you get all in pricing, which is again, I love this feature. I hate getting surprised with stupid fees that I don't want to pay. Game Time shows you all that stuff up front. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you can make sure that your view that you're about to purchase is the one you want, and a lowest price guarantee. Or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the entire ticketing industry, buddy.
So again, all in pricing, panoramic view, lowest price ticket guarantee, or that credit. Game Time ticket coverage, it's all available for you as I've outlined. Just take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account. Redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Let's get back to the show. Back here with Barrett. All right, so again, it's a big picture show. Let's be big picture because we got a lot of season left. And if we were doing this show monthly as opposed to weekly, it would sound a little bit different because maybe the Celtics work through some of this crap versus, game to game. When you only play 2, 3, 4 games in a week, it's, some of this stuff is going to carry over, obviously. So if you're looking right now with, again, this team's record is sitting 31-14. That's 45 games. You're a smidge more than halfway through the regular season with hopefully another, however many it is, couple dozen games after that in the playoffs. Here's the question. What's concerning, what's correctable about the Celtics right now in what you're seeing?
I think what's correctable is just some of these guys perform to their level. And one thing I will say in defense of Jaylen is if you go back to last year, look at Jaylen's numbers post All-Star break. He was awesome. And he started getting into the paint more, and his scoring, his points per game in the paint went completely up. But I do worry about, is there something going on with Derek White from a health perspective? And then secondarily would just be the defensive effort. Are they saying, hey, let's wait until after the All-Star break and then really dial it up? I don't think professional athletes have that type of conversation, but maybe it's just sort of like an unconscious thing where they figure out hey, we got to turn it on. We have to start picking it up from an effort perspective right here. But the Jaylen shooting thing really is alarming to me. And I don't know how you guys feel about that. It's because Jaylen, one of his biggest weapons and one of the things that made the Celtics team great is they were such an unbelievable 3-point shooting team last year. But Jaylen was that one guy that, hey, you need to hit it tough too. As we saw, arguably the biggest shot against the Mavericks was in Game 3, hit that mid-range jumper to put them up 4 that basically iced that game and basically made it official that they were going to win the championship. We knew Dallas, they won Game 4, but they weren't coming back from 3-0. You look at Jaylen's twos away from the rim this season, he is 105 of 266, 39.5%, 44th percentile. Last season, 216 of 447, 48.3%, 89th percentile. So he's almost down 10 percentage points there. Pull-up twos this season, 42 of 112, 37.5%. Last season, 116 of 245, 47.3%. So 10 percentage points down there. So, we talk about the defensive effort, which I do truly believe can get corrected. Is Jaylen going to start being the number 2 star that this team needs? I never thought we were going to have these conversations again after what we saw in the postseason. He won Eastern Conference Finals MVP and Finals MVP, and we can argue whether or not Tatum should have won it, but Jaylen had a really good case. He hit the biggest shot of the series. He guarded Luka, and he was awesome in the Indiana series. Hit the biggest shot in that series, the corner 3 in Game 1, right? And in the closing game, found Derek White for a wide open 3. Jaylen had this unbelievable playoff run. I'm surprised that the shooting has slipped this much from Jaylen. So that's the one thing to your original question, Kaufman. I think the defense can get better. I think if Derek White looks healthier in the second, because I don't think he looks right now. I don't know if you guys feel the same way. So I think Derek White can get back on track, and I would just give him a week off. I mean, we saw when Tatum got a week off, he came back and he played better. I don't understand. If something's bothering Derek White, just sit out. We keep hearing this stuff Jaylen's dealing with something, sit him out. I mean, it's not like you're in jeopardy of losing a playoff spot. Just sit some of these guys out. But that's the one big question I have about this team, because Jaylen is really the only other guy on this team besides Tatum that can break you down off the dribble and get his own shot and also create shots for other people. Right now, the shooting just isn't there.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that because I do think the Derek White stuff, he doesn't look right. And the thing that I always look for Derek is that in-between game. He's got a great floater, and if he's got that really working, it allows him to do all the other Derek White stuff offensively, take guys off the dribble, get the pump fake from 3-point range, put on the deck, then do a nice floater. He gets to the basket a little bit better. That stuff, I would love, again, a week, 2 weeks, whatever it's got to be for Derek to get back on track, because he is extremely important to what this is. They are being guarded differently, but they can still get to the stuff they want to get to, even though they're being guarded differently. I think they have to go back to the drawing board a little bit and say, hey, teams are doing this to us now. And maybe they're actively doing it and we're just not seeing it, and maybe the time off will help that. But just to come up with different ways to find the offense that you have been showcasing for 3+ years here, to find a way to get back to that. Because if they, Boston's 3-point shot, to get to Kaufman's point, that is what makes them go. So they get back to that. But a lot of the stuff I do think is easily correctable. I think rest will do this team a whole lot of good. I do think they should spend time second half of the season when they can, resting literally everybody. The issue that I have is the 2 best players on the team, and Derek White, I'll throw him in here. I'll throw Sam Hauser in here. These guys don't sit. None of these guys sit. They just don't. And what they're doing is they're not playing like a guy like Jordan Walsh. Like, dust him off and let him play a little bit. Like, Jaylen, you don't need to play tonight. Let's get Jordan Walsh like some more time.
Springer, man. More Springer.
Same thing. Or like when they eventually possibly, get Lonnie Walker back on this team. Again, I don't know what's going on in that situation. I'm just monitoring it from afar. But like if he were to make a way back, it'd be an easier way to give guys nights off because he can carry the scoring loads. I wouldn't necessarily think that home court advantage is like a huge thing. You obviously want it as long as you could possibly get it. But at a certain point, like trust who you are. You're not afraid of playing anybody in any location. You're not going to have home court in the finals because Oklahoma City's record is just way better than yours. But at the same, so sacrifice some of that for rest. Rest needs to be a huge priority for this team because they've just too many guys are either older, like Drew Holiday, Al Horford, no question. Even like Porzingis with the mileage in his body and all the injuries he's racked up. Like rest these guys. It's going to be okay. Count on the guys below you. Let Jordan Walsh, let Baylor Shireman for crying out loud get some run out there for a little bit. Sacrifice that to make sure because everything that we've talked about in this podcast has all revolved around, this is a rough month, but like let's see what happens, what it looks like in March and April. And
hey, can I interject one thing on your point there? Because with Springer specifically, what if Derek White and Drew Holiday don't look like the same level of defenders? And you're like, let's see what we have with Springer, right? Because what if there's this moment, knock on wood, it doesn't happen, where it's like, hey, Drew just twisted his ankle in a playoff game and he's going to miss the next game. Or Derek White twisted his ankle. Or Derek White just doesn't look the same. It's like, hold on. Like, this guy had 4 steals, and I know it's against the Clippers, but if you, like, sit Derek White out some games, give Springer an opportunity, and if you do need him in the playoffs, at least you'll know. Like, down the stretch of the season, if you give him more minutes, you're like, okay, now, we worry about the shooting despite the fact that he shot the ball well lately. Well, hey, if we need him, like if we need him, like somebody that can guard somebody, at least we can find out during the regular season what it looks like. That's why I feel like, hey, you kind of slipped into the Springer thing. Like I kind of want to see more of the guy just in case you may need him. Like why not try this out?
Well, kind of in the same way that, Pritchard's role grew, obviously, drafted player. Hauser's role grew, undrafted player. Springer, what's his situation going to be? But obviously in limited opportunity of late, it's been promising. You got some other guys in the G League that, we really haven't seen as of yet. I mean, trade deadline is not that far away. And then after that, you'll have buyout market and just opportunities to add to this team. We keep talking about how it's generally, in terms of all the important areas, the same group from last year. It's largely unchanged. But, and I'm not going in any particular order here, but in terms of your most important players, you have the Jays, that's 2. Horford, Porzingis, 4. White, Holiday, 6. Pritchard, Hauser brings you to 8. I don't think I missed anyone there. So that's your top 8 in whatever order you want to slot them in, obviously. The question becomes, how do you improve things if in fact you need to? I mean, no team is perfect. Clearly, even last year, as dominant, as historic as it wasn't perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect team. So where do you add here? What are you looking for in terms of role, skill set, or even a specific player who may be available?
Well, if you watched the TNT broadcast last night, according to Reggie Miller, they have a chance to get Jeremy Grant and his $29 million salary, which like
there were two names that they can't possibly afford. I know one was Jeremy Grant. What was the other one?
McCollum was the other one.
Oh,
but it's like I don't understand how like in the production meeting somebody was like, "This is impossible, Reggie. They can't make this."
They made the graphic.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like how they allowed that to get on TV. I really think they're going to be thin in terms of what they can possibly add. There's not much they can really do unless you want to say like flip one of the young guys for something. Like Pina came on my pod a couple of weeks ago and said like, would you flip Shireman for a Garrison Matthews type just to like get another guy off the bench that can shoot? But I'm intrigued now with Shireman, and I know it's the G League, but he's been like ripping it up. I'd like to see. Like to Valenti's point, I'd like to see more from Walsh and Shireman. I just think Hoffman, I don't know how they're going to be able to add to this team. I just think it's going to be awfully difficult. Like I don't even think it'd be something as, and this is kind of crazy to think about. Like Tillman's on this team still. Like he only plays in garbage time. Like I think it'll be something lesser than what we saw in terms of the Tillman addition last year. Like they're going to have to be really creative if they want to add anything. I think it's internal. They have what they need here. They really do. They have enough here to be able to repeat and win a championship. It's really because of the new CBA. All these teams, it's going to be difficult for them to make a move. It's going to be almost impossible for the Knicks to make a move. And now they have they also just gave up 5 first-round draft picks for Mikal Bridges. So I don't see outside, I don't know what's going to happen with this Jimmy Butler situation. He's like the most annoying guy in the league, and in all likelihood, if he gets moved, it's going to be out west. But I don't really see significant moves happening until the offseason. Like maybe Markkanen gets moved somewhere in the offseason. I don't see Levine. Where's Levine going with that salary?
Sure.
And if you're the Bulls, do you want to trade him now? He's playing well. Wouldn't you wait?
And
Well,
also
if you do-
Levine,
Yeah.
Vooch, these guys are on the trade block every year. They don't go anywhere. So it's that's those.
Yeah, but
those
they're playing
guys,
they're playing
Butler's
way
getting
better than
dealt.
normally.
Those guys
do.
are believe it when I see it.
Yeah, I mean the thing with Levine is I would want to get something really good back for Levine at this point because he's been playing so well.
Mhm.
Same with Vucevic. That team gives Boston problems. I'm just gonna come out and say it. I can't believe more people aren't trying to trade for those guys because those guys give themselves a lot of problems. And we talked about this with Steve Bulpett a couple weeks ago. The CBA has made what generates a ton of content and a ton of fan involvement and interactions and all this stuff. Has taken that and has made it harder for teams to do stuff like that. Well, they did that on purpose or not to get more continuity in the game. That's one thing. I don't know. But not a lot of people can do a lot of moves. You look at Phoenix, and Phoenix with Matt Ishbia is we have picks. We'll trade any of them for Jimmy Butler. We're going to do this. But the problem with that is Bradley Beal's got no trade clause. He can do whatever he wants. I don't think we're going to see a ton of action this year. I really don't. I think it's going to be really slow. I think people are going to be pissed about it. And I think whether that's good for basketball or not, I don't know. But I know a lot of people aren't going to like this.
Well, it's a great point by you, Valenti, about the NBA has really hurt itself because one of the most interesting thing in this league is transactions. And now your best teams in the league can't make transactions. And the whole idea of this was supposed to be to punish Steve Ballmer, whose team is playing unbelievable. Ironically, they got under the second apron when they decided to let Paul George walk, and they're now better for it. But it was hey, we don't want Ballmer spending all this money, and we don't want the Warriors spending all this money. And what has sort of happened because of that is now Denver's a different conversation. They could have kept some of their guys, although who knows, KCP's having a terrible season. But when you look at it, it's think about the Celtics where they drafted their 2 best players, 3rd overall. They made a really unbelievable trade for Derek White that people didn't believe in at the time. Drew Holiday, that's an opportunistic trade where that was a great move for the Celtics. It helped them win a championship. And Porzingis was a great trade for the Celtics. So, and by the way, on the margins, they find Hauser, they found Peyton Pritchard, which now those contracts are very valuable for the Celtics. They found even a guy like Cornette that gives you minutes, right? That has had a pretty good season for the Celtics. It's one of the teams that's going to get punished in the near future is a team that did everything right. Now, everybody else is going to be dealing with those same issues, right? But say if you're a Cleveland, do you want to make a trade and start getting into the second apron now? Or do you want to wait? Because then you're going to have to you're in the second apron, your pick gets frozen for if you keep being in the second apron, then you have to come out of the second apron for a year before you go back in the second apron. I really think the league's going to go back and look at this because it's not in the best interest of the league to have this second apron situation where it's you have to have basically to the dollar the amount that you're trading. It's just way too, and you can't put multiple players in the trade. It's only 1 for 1. It's just stupid.
It's not clean. That's for damn sure. And makes guys like Mike Zarin's jobs that much more complicated, obviously. So Celtics, we've gone on for a little while here. We understand how tune-out works after an hour-long show. Celtics finish off their West Coast swing, even though this one is, Southwest. Take on the Dallas Mavericks here. Coming up on Saturday, and then you've got a couple of home games. The Rockets followed by the Bulls on Monday and Wednesday, and then I suspect we'll be back with you probably Thursday to do a show, Thursday or Saturday anyway, in the midst of that road trip. Which begins, Friday, a week from today with New Orleans. But this is a stretch doesn't get easier, guys. the Mavericks, I know they're shorthanded, but they're still frisky, and you would think Kyrie gets up for that game. And then the Rockets and the Bulls. So we'll see. You got Kyrie and Udoka, and I don't know, is there a former Celtic tied to Chicago that we can that we actually care about? Not that I can think of off the top.
Used to be Javonte Green, but he's not there anymore. So
yeah, not really. But listen, I hope people out there watching or listening just take all that we're talking about, and I'm sure other pods and talking heads are discussing as well, is that there are some of the ups and downs of the season. That's natural. But there are also some problem areas with this team on the quest to repeating right now in late January. Does it mean they will be issues in March or April or May or June? Nope, doesn't. But right now, we got to discuss, obviously, the things that are afflicting this team. And there's some psychological, some mental things that seem to be going on right now, more so than necessarily the physical, although it does drop down, obviously, to performance as outlined with a lot of numbers. But they'll get right. I'm still a believer they'll get right. The sky is not falling. If we're doing this exact same show again in a month, I might have a different tune. That would be a 3-month malaise. But right now, there's room for optimism. So for Evan Valenti, I'm Adam Kaufman. Our guest, of course, Brian Barrett, Off the Pike podcast for The Ringer. He is a regular contributor to this show and kind enough to welcome the two of us onto his every so often as well. Barrett, we always appreciate you, bud. Let's talk again soon.
All right, I appreciate it, fellas. Have a great weekend.
All right, again, Celtics back at it Saturday in Dallas. Take them down, would you? Finish that 3-1 trip. Make the whining on social media stop. Rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. It is Celtics Beat. You know that by now. We'll catch you soon.